Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Miss Lisa, and this is biology. We're going to be using this book, Glencoe Biology, an Everyday Experience. I'm going to use the one with the butterfly on the front. And this class is primarily for homeschoolers who want to do a science class. But if I do a topic and it's you like the way I explain things, then other biology students can watch this. I put like, share, subscribe, like all the other YouTubers. I'm really trying to get more people to subscribe because I'm doing this to just help out the homeschool community. And the easiest way for me to do it is if I can do live streaming. I used to do this on Facebook for the classes I tutored, and it was easier, but YouTube won't let you do it unless you have 1,000 subscribers. My kids say, "Mom, that's just not going to happen," but I'm like, I can dream, I can hope. So anyway, this is biology, and we are going to start with talking about chapter 1. This book, if you look at the back of it, it has 32 chapters. It's got all the chapters on the back, and I will probably make it 32 separate videos. So I'll make one for each one. There might be some that it's going to take you a few more weeks. A normal school year is 40 weeks, but we're going to be, if we cover the whole book, we're done. We can do it in 32 weeks because, you know, there's field trips. You might want to go to the aquarium or to the zoo. You can incorporate those things in there and you can get your enough stuff in there. Now, another thing before we get started that I want to talk about is that it would be very good if you could get a microscope for this class. Is it required? No, they're so expensive. I got mine from Home Science Tools. It is a website designed for homeschoolers, so that might be a good place. They used to be Home Training Tools, but they've redone their website. It's Home Science Tools. And a good one, you want, if you're going to buy one, you want one that's one of the good ones. It needs to have high power. It doesn't need to be a little plate one, the little National Geographic one that you buy at the toy store. That's really not going to be quite good enough. You need one where you can see well, and it would be great if you could get it, but you don't have to have it because everything I tell you to look at is on the internet. So if I tell you to go look at an amoeba, you can Google amoeba, go to images, there's your amoeba, you can draw it. Now, it's not giving you that hands-on experience of actually learning how to use a microscope, which is very valuable. It will help you when you get to college. But if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. You know, I've had those years as a homeschooler where there were some years where it's like, I don't know if we can buy books this year. We might have to be checking them out of the library. But every year I was able to buy books. But there were some years that were definitely leaner than others. And some years there is no way I could have spent $150 on a microscope. So anyway, if you can get one, great. I'm going to teach you how to use it. The other thing, what you do need for this class is you need a sketchbook, because when you look up the amoeba, I want you to draw it. That's what we do in biology. We draw what we see. Drawing makes you concentrate on it and makes you really observe it. So that's what I want you to do. I want you to have a sketchbook, have colored pencils, have a notebook, and if you can get a microscope, get one. The other thing is, one reason why I picked out this book is because there's lots of labs in it that's very easy for homeschoolers to do at home without special chemicals or equipment. So most chapters have 2 labs, and at least one of those is usually with everyday things you can easily get your hands on. And sometimes it might call for something more specific, but I can tell you what to substitute. As a science teacher, I know, oh, we can use this instead. We don't need that expensive, weird chemical. We can use baking soda or whatever it is. So anyway, I think it's going to be really fun. So let's start talking about chapter 1. So what is biology? Biology is the study of life. Bio means life, ology means study. So we're going to study life in this. Now, and people who do this are called biologists. And your book makes the point that a lot of people use biology that you don't really think about. Things like your grandmother with her garden. She has some pest who's attacking her tomato plants. Then she will research and find out what's the best way to get rid of this pest. The guy who, sprays for bugs, he's an entomologist. He knows about bugs. So there's a lot of people that, of course, all the medicine fields, the eye doctor, the nurse, the physical therapist, all of those people are biologists. And then, of course, there are the ones who are researchers in a lab who are running tests. There are people who work in the hospital lab running tests. I used to do that a long time ago. I thought I might want to do that when I grew up, and I tried it, and I hated it. Just hated it. I felt sorry for myself having to get up so early in the morning. And I did not like being in the lab with quiet little test tubes. I would talk to him. I'd say, "Oh, Mr. Smith, how are you doing today?" And then I'd do the test on the test tube, which I was calling Mr. Smith because it was his stuff, his blood or whatever. And then I'd pull him out and go, "Oh, you're doing terrible. Let's go put it in the computer." And I'd go put it in the computer and he's died. And I go, "Oh, yeah, I can tell you were not doing good. Sorry about that, Mr. Smith. Let's get the next one out." So I just couldn't see myself doing that forever. So I ended up being a teacher. I love it. It's what I'm supposed to do. My degree is not in education, it's in science. So I could go get a job in science again, but I love teaching. I'm going to keep teaching. All right, so tools of biology. The first one is the microscope, and I brought two microscopes to show you that are mine, and they're heavy. Okay, this is the first one. It's called a stereoscope. See how it has two eye hole things? Also, it has where light can go through. That's solid right there. It lets light through, but it does not shine light through something. You look at bigger stuff like a bug or a solid leaf or a stick or a whole lichen plant, something like that, with this one. So that's why it doesn't really have a place for a slide. It's got that big, really looks like the bottom of a petri dish that you can put your organism in, even a living organism. You can look at it in that. And it doesn't magnify as much, okay? You don't need both of these. It's great if you have them, but you don't need both. Okay, so this one is our regular compound microscope. This is the one that I got from Home Science Tools. It's a light microscope. You plug it in. It's got a lamp down here where it shines light up here to the stage. This is called the stage. These are the clips, the stage clips. And it shines the light through the specimen. So the light goes through the very, very thin specimen, and you get to see all the details inside the cell, inside the amoeba, inside the piece of leaf, whatever it is. You look in the eyepiece. This is the nose, and these are the lenses on the nose, so it's kind of funny. It's got some biological things. This is called the arm, and how you carry it is you hold one hand around the arm, the other one under the base. This is the base, and you hold it up close to you as you walk around with it. You do not walk around the lab swinging it. I heard tale of a college student who was walking through the lab, swinging their microscope around, and the professor said, "Get out, you have an F. You don't treat microscopes like that." So now you've been warned, hold your microscope carefully and don't get kicked out of biology lab and have to get an F. So let me teach you how to use it. These are the foci, is that what you say? And this one is coarse and this one is fine. So sometimes they're different, but the big one's going to be the coarse one. What you do is you put your slide under the clips here. You start at the lowest power, the littlest magnifier or magnifying lens here. And then you take your coarse focus and you make it with your eye here, not here. You look at it and you go all the way up. The reason why you do it like this is if it was one of the big ones and you had it on there and you start cranking it up, then it could squish your slide into your lens and break it. And it can break your slide too, but the slides are cheaper than the lenses, so you don't want to break your lens. So that's why your eye's out here, so you can see, oh no, I'm about to squish it. I don't want to break my lens, okay? Then you look at it, you put your eye in and you look. If you have to, you can like close one eye until you get used to it. It takes a little getting used to focus using just one eye in this thing. And then with your thing, you bring it down until you see a little blip of usually color. You see it come into focus, just a blip, and then you could go up just a little bit to get that back in focus as good as you can. And then you use the fine focus, and with the fine focus, you can go up and down. Just go up and down, that one's fine. You're not gonna break it with the fine focus. And this is what looking on Google is not gonna teach you. As a biology teacher who's done this for decades, and I always tell my kids, we're not gonna talk about how many and how old I am, but what the kids do is they'll focus on the wrong thing. They'll focus on a bubble, an air bubble. They'll focus on a piece of lint. They'll focus too far up, and then they'll say, Miss Blackburn, did I find it? And I look and I'm like, nope, you didn't find it. And I'll go and I'll find it. And they're like, how did you find that? And I'm like, I've been doing this for decades. So that being able to find things in the microscope really comes with practice. So, if you can get the microscope, you would get that hands-on practice that is useful. All right. And if you can swing it, do. I couldn't at first. I wanted to get a microscope when my boys were little for our homeschool. I always thought, I want to get a good microscope, but we couldn't afford it, so we had to get the little National Geographic play one from Toys R Us. And we had fun with it, but it was really frustrating because a good microscope, it's much easier to really see what you're supposed to see. So look in your book, learn those parts of the microscope. That's important. I showed you a stereo microscope already. If you have a microscope, you're going to be doing the lab on page 9. You're going to look at a piece of newsprint. I think you look at a hair off of your head. So if you've got a microscope, do that lab. If not, you could just look it up and see what you're supposed to see on the internet. Okay, now measurements in biology. In biology, and in science, we use the SI system of units. Now, what is SI? Well, it stands for a French word. Here is my perfect French. It's like Système de Units, International. So S stands for that Système thing, and the I stands for the International. It's International System of Units, if I translate it. But we would say international first, so it would be IS if it was in English, but it's French. France is considered sort of the center of scientific learning, going back to the 1700s when Antoine Lavoisier was the father of chemistry there, and Marie Curie, that's where she was working and presented her findings about radium and polonium. So even though they're not the biggest center of scientific discovery right now, that is still considered the center of organized international science. And there they have the standards for the units. Now, you have grown up with two systems of units, both English or imperial, it's called both of those names, and then the SI or metric. Those are kind of called the same thing too. SI and metric is slightly different, but it's basically the same. Most of them are the same. There's just a few small differences. So you've grown up with both. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and when I grew up, we had English, which was the regular thing. Inches, feet, yards, ounces, pounds, Fahrenheit degrees, cups, teaspoons, tablespoons, all of that was the regular stuff. And then in the 80s, they decided they were going to help us be more like the rest of the world and start learning the metric system. And the first thing I remember being metric was Coca-Cola, coming in a 1 liter. In the beginning, it was a 1 liter bottle, and then it was the 2 liter. So that was the beginning of us learning a little bit about the metric system. And it was very easy for my generation to keep them straight. The metric system was the weird one, and English was the regular one. And we could sort of think, we knew how much a gallon was. We knew how big a foot was and things like that. You guys, as a science teacher, what I've found is y'all are terrible at measurements. Because you've grown up with both systems, I feel like you don't know either. I feel like y'all are much worse at measurements. And I used to say that when they make me queen of math and science, that at midnight, boom, we're going metric. No more of this two systems business. It's just too confusing. But then I started watching that Great British Bake Off with Paul Hollywood, and I have decided that the English, the way they use metric, is not convenient. I was talking to one of my other students that I teach this week, and he was saying, you know, you've got meters, which are huge, and you've got centimeters that are this big, or millimeters that big. They don't have good in the middle measurements like a foot that people are very familiar with. There is a decimeter, but they don't really use it. So they end up using weird things like they weigh themselves in stones. I don't even know what it means, but they talk about it on the Great British Bake Off. Oh, I weigh about 12 stones. I'm like, this is so weird. I weigh 4 pebbles. I don't know. But anyway, so now I have decided, when they make me queen of math and science, that we will use English day to day, just like we did in the 70s. Miles, feet, pounds, cups, teaspoons. Oh, that's the other thing. Is in cooking, it is just so weird the way they try to do it without good English measurements. So cooking, all that, we will just go back to English. It's a very convenient system. And in science class, we'll use metric, because for science, metric is so much easier to convert between units. And but I don't know how I'm going to get to be queen of math and science, because it's not really a thing. So maybe I need to talk to the president. I don't know. See if I can be appointed, because I don't think anybody's voting for me, except maybe the few kids I've taught. All right, so let's talk about the metric system, because that's what we use in science. None of the English stuff, it's metric. The unit of length in metric, or SI, is the meter. It's about the same as the yard. It's 39 inches, so it's 3 more inches, about 39. The other thing, that's the standard one, the basic unit. You could also put kilo on first. Kilo means 1,000, so 1,000 meters is a kilometer or kilometer. And that's what they use instead of miles. We use miles around here. And then a centimeter is about as big as your pinky. Your pinky finger is across. A millimeter is the little one, and it's about how close you can get your fingers together without them touching. So get as close to your can without touching. That's a millimeter. Okay, and there, milli means thousand, so there's 1,000 millimeters in a meter. So in biology class, you need a ruler. You need a ruler that has centimeters and millimeters on it. They sell them at the Dollar Tree for $1. So I've seen them for 50 cents this time of year. It's the summer here, and so you might get one for 50 cents. But you need one. You will be measuring things in this class. You might need to measure a goldfish. We'll see. All right, so volume. Volume has 2 ways to measure it. Volume is length times width times height. So one way to measure volume, like if it's of a cube, is with a ruler. You measure the length, the width, and the height. You multiply them together, and you would get a cubic unit, like centimeters cubed, or cubic, whatever it is. It could be, you know, cubic yards if it was in English, or cubic meters if it's in metric. So that's one way to do it. Another way is the volume unit. Just like how we have gallons, they have liters. So that is another way to measure volume, and they're related. If you had a 1 centimeter cubed, imagine it's as big as your pinky on each side, a tiny little box. Can you imagine that? If we filled it up with water, it would take about 10 drops. That little box is called a cubic centimeter, and it's the same thing as a milliliter. So you can measure liquid volume in milliliters or in cubic centimeters. Usually cubic centimeters are only solid things, except, hold on, in the medical industry, they use cc's. So you'll hear on the medical shows, quick, Get me a shot of epinephrine, 100 cc's, quick. I need to shoot it in this person. cc is short for cubic centimeter. In other areas of science, we would say, get me 100 milliliters. But in medicine, they use the cc. All right, so that's what that is. So remember, 1 cubic centimeter is the same thing as 1 milliliter. Okay, weight and mass. Now, are weight and mass the same thing? Kind of yes and no. Now, I know there's some science teachers who are right now going, no, you're wrong. But this is what the answer is. Weight is how much gravity pulls on you. Okay, so if I tell you how much I weigh, that means I stood on my scale and gravity pulled on me, the little needle went up, and it told me if I'd been eating too many donuts or not. And, you know, that's what my weight is. What causes the scale to go down is gravity. But if you take my body and put it in a spacesuit, because I want to live, and put me in outer space, I would be weightless. Gravity would not be pulling on me anymore, but all of the matter that makes me up would still be here. Does that make sense? I always have to ask that, even though I know you can't answer. But if we were teaching face-to-face, I would be looking in your eyes to make sure you understand. And I would say, does that make sense? So it's just habits. So does that make sense? So but on Earth, you still, if we measure the matter that's in me, often how we do it is with gravity. So like I have what is called a balance. And this balance, I'm doing the air quotes, and I'll tell you why in a second. The balance is supposed to measure the matter in you, not the weight. But the electronic balances I have in my lab work on gravity. They would not work in outer space. But when we measure mass, it has different units. So the measurement of mass units we will use in this class that are metric are kilograms, grams. It's going to be grams will be our main thing. Now, do you need a balance for this class? It would be good. Some of you might have postal scales. A lot of people do their mailing things from their house now, and they can do their own postage. You can pay for your postage online. That's me typing on a computer. And so a lot of people have them. A lot of those postal scales only measure within 2 grams. It goes 0, 2, 4, so they're not that precise. I got a little electronic balance, I think, off of eBay for $10. So if you can get one, it'd be great. You can use it in physics and physical science, chemistry. $10 is not real expensive. I think it would be wise to get one. You could probably make it okay through this class without it. So it just depends on how tight your homeschool budget is this year. If you can afford it, that would be nice. So, all right. So we talked about volume, we talked about weight and mass and how they work and what the difference is. The next thing is time and temperature. Time is measured the same in English and in metric. It's the second is the basic unit. Temperature is different. Temperature in English is Fahrenheit degrees. We don't use that in science. In the metric system, it's Celsius degrees. And in SI, it's Kelvin. We have a third one. In science, we normally don't use Kelvin. We usually use Celsius degrees in the high school level. The big difference is there in chemistry, we're going to do some things called gas laws, and we use Kelvin then. Kelvin, a Kelvin degree and a Celsius degree is actually the same amount. It's just where you start. With Kelvin, you start at absolute 0, which is where it's so cold that molecular motion ceases. Everything gets still. Normally, even your book that's sitting in front of you that appears to be still, if you could see the atoms, they would be vibrating. As long as they have some temperature to them and they're not all the way down to absolute 0, then the molecules, even in a solid, are vibrating. If we could just like shrink down like in the magic school bus and go down, we would see that. So Kelvin starts at 0. You can't have any negative degrees because that's where motion ceases. That's as cold as it can get. Celsius has negative degrees. And then for Celsius, 0 is where water freezes, and 100 is where water boils. Body temperature is, I think, 38, 37. I'm not used to it. I'm used to English when it comes to body temperature. Ooh, 98.6. You know, do I have a fever or not? I'm not used to it in metric. Not one I use very often. And in the high school lab, we're not usually taking our temperature. We're taking the temperature of some boiling water or something. So that is time and temperature. Now, the next part is the scientific method. And a lot of times in elementary school, they make you memorize. State a question, form a hypothesis, make an experiment, analyze the results, you know, change it, do more experiments, stuff like that. In reality, and they're starting to do a little bit better job teaching it, is that a lot of times real scientists do not do, I need to discover something today. Let's do step 1. Let's do step 2. In reality, scientists will often just approach problems in a systematic way based on observation and experiments. And they try to do those observations and experiments. They try to do observations without clouding it by inference, without jumping to conclusions that might be wrong. And they try to make their science something that is measurable. And they also want to have it where they can compare it, where they only manipulate one variable at a time, one thing at a time, and also have it compared to something, a control, that has none of the variables manipulated. And also in science, sometimes things are discovered completely on accident. But it's not, but the scientists still were looking at that accident through the lenses of their science glasses, their science point of view, where they are being very good at observation and realizing what's going on and how they can follow it up with further experiments. And I can give you lots of examples of things that were discovered by accident in science that were important discoveries. But the scientists still use the scientific method in that they made very good observations, they thought of new experiments, and they were able to test it. So, scientific method. Okay, let me, this is the story I always tell about it. When I am doing science, I am very good about doing the scientific method. I will, you know, only have one variable I manipulate. I have a control. I have my idea, my hypothesis. I think of my way to test it. I analyze my results. I come to a conclusion. I am so good. But when it comes to real life and I have a cold or I'm sick, then I just throw all science out the window and I will manipulate every variable at once. You know, somebody will tell me, oh, you should take a lot of vitamin C. So I start taking vitamin C. And someone says, oh, you need this essential oil. Rub this on your head. I'm like, quick, pass it to me. Let's rub that on too. And oh, you need this supplement. I'll take it. And this, oh, I'll take that too. So when I get well, I have no idea what made me well because I do not control the experiment at all. When it comes to me, I just want to get well as fast as possible. I'll try anything anybody tells me to try as long as it's kind of safe and legal. Absolutely legal, kind of safe. I mean, sometimes I'm like, One time I was in the library tutoring, and I had a cold, and a homeschool mom was there and dropping off her kid for tutoring, and she said, oh, you sound terrible. And I'm like, I just don't feel good. I think I have a cold. She says, wait a second, I got something in the car. She comes back with a handful of yellow pills. Do I know what they were? Nope. Here, take these. I was like, great, how many? And I go take them, and you should not take pills from just a handful of pills that have no idea what it is, just from some person. But I trusted her. I knew her. I did not even know what was in the pills. Just, I'll take them. But whatever it was, my cats loved it. I had them in my little teacher where I have cables for my calculator, compass protractor, highlighters, dry erase markers, all that stuff in this little thing. Well, because I had gotten them at the library while I was tutoring, I threw the rest in there. My cats would go crazy to smell those pills. So for all I know, it was catnip, but I got well, so there you go. And my voice is crackledy right now. It's because it's the time of the late summer where ragweed starts blooming. And every year my voice sounds terrible, but it doesn't bother me. I just feel sorry for you guys having to listen to it. All right, so back on track, no more about the yellow pills. Part of me is really tempted to go look through my little teacher box that's right there and see if I can find any of those yellow pills, if they're still in there or not. Don't know what they are. I should take them to the lab and figure it out. All right, so look at the bottom of page 15 if you've got the book. It says the scientific method. You start with a problem, you recognize it, and you research it. So before you just start doing experiments, you want to find out, has somebody else already done the experiment? I don't want to just repeat somebody else's. I want to discover something new. So do some research, come up with a hypothesis, which is a statement that can be tested. Do an experiment. It needs to only manipulate one variable. It needs to have a control, something you don't manipulate so you can compare, and you need to generate some sort of data so that you can analyze your results. You come to a conclusion. It may lead to another hypothesis. It might be inconclusive and you need more experiments. And then it says eventually theory. Now, we're going to talk about that. All right, so turn the page to 16. It talks about a hypothesis is an idea that you have for whatever it is, and it needs to be testable. See, I used to come, okay, I won't go into that yet. So how you test it is with an experiment. On page 17, there's an experiment I want you to do this week, and it involves pinto beans. They don't have to be pinto beans. They can be any kind of seed or bean, but pinto beans that you just buy to eat, and they will sprout. Usually they have not done anything to kill it. I used to have some garbanzo beans that I bought years ago. And I bought them because I thought, oh, we'll make our own hummus. Because garbanzo beans is another word for chickpeas. Oh, they were terrible. I like buying the can because I did not make mine taste good. Blech. So I had this bag of garbanzo beans. Those things lasted years and years and years. Every time we had an experiment where we had to sprout something or count something or guess how many beans were in a jar, those were the beans we used. And even after all those years, you could take some of those beans, wrap it in a damp paper towel, leave it for a couple of days, then sprout. Those seeds are asleep. Those beans are seeds. They're asleep. They're ready to be brought back to life with this method that you're going to see. They're not really dead. They're really alive. You're not really bringing them back to life. You're waking them up. But anyway, it's on page 17. So you're going to use the scientific method and manipulate variables to see how it affects seed sprouting. So if you don't have any pinto beans, go look in your gardening stuff. See if you have an old pack of seeds, something that you could use. I'm all about not going and buying new things, looking around and seeing what you got that you can use for an experiment. So always look around first before you go buy something. So we talked about variable. That's the thing that we're going to change. We're going to do our experiment on. And data is what we're going to try to generate. And then we're going to try to draw conclusions. Look on page 19. It says, let's review the steps that is used. You recognize the problem. You research the problem. You form a hypothesis. You test the hypothesis. With the experiment, it should only have one variable being manipulated or tested and a control. You draw conclusions. Now, the next idea is theory. The word theory in science is different than it is in everyday speech. In everyday speech, theory is an idea. And you don't test it, and it's just your idea. I have a theory, etc., etc. I used to have my fruitcake theory, and it was because I don't like fruitcake, never eaten one that I've liked yet, and I'm pretty old. My theory was no one likes it. They're full of sugar, which is a preservative, and some of them have a lot of alcohol in them, which is a preservative. So my idea was that all the fruitcake that had ever been made was made sometime in the 50s, and ever since then people are just re-gifting these things. Nobody really eats it. But then one of my students said, no, Miss Blackburn, I love fruitcake, and you would too if you ate my grandmama's fruitcake. Well, I was waiting for her to bring me some. She never did. So I still don't like it. But she swore that if I ate grandmama's fruitcake, I would like it. So that would have been the end of my theory. But was it a real theory? In science, absolutely not. in science, for it to be a theory, it has to be testable and tested over and over and over again. And basically, they're true. Theories in science are true. Because, this is my example, we call it the atomic theory of matter. And that idea is that everything's made out of atoms, basically. There's more to it, which I will go over in chemistry class if you want to watch that video. But it's that everything's made out of atoms. Is that true? Yes. We have gotten electron microscopes. We have looked at it. We have seen the atoms. When it was very first proposed by Democritus and then John Dalton, it was an idea, but we've proven it true. So why don't we call it the atomic fact of matter? It's because it's changing. When John Dalton proposed it, he said that the atom was indivisible, and atom actually means indivisible. That's what the word atom means. But now we know that the atom is made out of protons, neutrons, and electrons, and even smaller stuff, all the subatomic particles, the quarks, the mesons, the gluons, all those things that you can learn about in physics if you want to take that class from me. But so it's changing. And do we know everything about the atom now? Are we ready to call it? No. There's dark matter. We don't know much about dark matter at all. We think it exists, and we think it's going to be the answer to everything. And it's very funny to watch some current scientists talk about dark matter and how it's just going to save everybody. But so there's still stuff out there that we don't know about. So as we're still learning, it's evolving. This theory is a model that explains what goes on in the world. Now, so what's the difference between theory and law? The one way I think that helps students understand it, and there are more technical definitions that you can certainly learn, but what I think helps them get it in their head is laws are so true, they're math. The laws have an equation that go with them. They have constants. They are the physics laws. They're like gravity. Gravity is not just a thing you experiment with or experience. Gravity has an equation. It has a constant. We do math with the laws. So which one is more true? The theories or the laws? The laws. Laws trump theories. So if it was a card game, the law would win. So if you're not sure about something, if there is a law that contradicts, then the theory is probably wrong. So keep that in mind. So for it to be a theory, though, it must be testable. So there are some scientific theories, I'm doing my air quotes, where we call it a scientific theory, but it is not testable. So we are using the word theory in common everyday speech way. Like, you know, people have their theory about whatever. Well, my theory about that is, and they'll tell you their idea. So that's one thing that makes it confusing, is in science, there are areas of science that we will use the word theory to describe something that is not testable, not observable. We can't do hundreds and hundreds of current observation tests on it. So when we are saying theory, we're using it like my fruitcake theory in the common everyday sense, but not the scientific sense. And so that's why it's confusing. Hopefully that helps you understand it better. Okay, technology is also very important to biology, and science, and in particular a lot in medicine now. We have some amazing technology, MRI machines, all these machines, and I always keep my sort of ear up listening for science news, and some of the new technology coming out just sounds terrific. All right, so how this class is going to work is I want you to read the chapter. In the description of each video, I will tell you what I recommend that you do for homework. I do not recommend that you do everything. I think that just is unnecessary. these books that I use are public school textbooks, and they're not really designed for every kid to do every problem. Some of the problems are for reteaching, some of them are for, accelerating a kid. So they put more problems in there, expecting the teacher to assign certain ones, but not all of them. If you want to do them all, feel free, but I think if you just do the ones I assign, that's great. Now, what about grades? If the moms want to get the teacher's edition so they could grade the homework, they could. A lot of times I feel like the point of homework is not really to have a grade, it's to learn. And I feel like your test is your grade. So, but you might want to know if you're getting the answers right. You might be getting the answers wrong and not really learning. So this is one of the newer editions of this book, but I still think that you should be able to find teacher's edition really cheap. Look at eBay, look at Amazon, look at Alberus. Those places, a lot of times you can find used textbooks that are not the current edition, and these are not, for really cheap. So you might want to get the teacher's edition. Also, there is a Facebook group, and it's called Mrs. Lisa, not Miss Lisa, but Mrs. Lisa. On that Facebook group, you can ask to join. You just have to show that you're, a homeschool parent who wants to get access to this. There will be tests and answers. So, it's all free. So if you could not buy the teacher's edition and just join the free Facebook group, you could get tests and answers. We don't let the kids join because there's answers there too, not just tests. All right, so that's chapter 1. Come back for chapter 2. I'm going to leave you every time with, I'm going to try to get it into your head that science is great, that you're going to love science and you're going to love this class, and we're going to have a lot of fun in it. I think biology is one of my favorite classes to take, and I hope you enjoy it too. Oh, I have one other thing to say about this. Okay, so this book is written at a not super advanced reading level, and I like to use it for that reason, because sometimes I have 8th graders who want to go ahead and take biology, and sometimes they're 12th graders. So for some of you, you might want to make this class a little harder, and if you do, then what I would recommend to you is do this class, read this book, do these labs, do this homework I'm going to assign, but go get another biology book and learn the vocabulary in it, because the only thing about this book is it is a little soft on vocabulary, and if you want to make this class more rigorous, then you could get a different biology book, figure out which chapters correspond, and use that other book for vocabulary. Take the word list, look them up in the back, memorize their definitions, and that would be a way of accelerating this class and making it just a little bit more advanced. So I did that with my kids. They did the more readable, easier, understandable book to get the concepts for conceptual, and then they did, I can't remember which one. It has a killer whale on the front, but it doesn't matter. Any of them will do. But if you just get one of the other, and you can go look on Alberus, you can get these things for really cheap if they're an older edition. There's the Tiger book. There's just about all of them that are regular high school books. They would have that a little bit more advanced vocabulary. Do you need to do this? No, this is absolutely a high school class. But if you want to accelerate it a little bit more, I would go get one more biology book and add to this class, on top of what I'm telling you to do, vocabulary. Look up the words, make flashcards, memorize those words. All right, so let me leave you with science is great. Come back next week.